Whenever it's been mentioned to me of, hey, he likes this school, Mizzou always seems to be in there. Hey, he likes Texas and Mizzou. He likes Michigan and Mizzou. He likes Georgia, likes Tennessee, likes Mizzou. Mizzou's been a consistent factor there.
Okay, we are now going to welcome on a very, very special guest. He is 247 Sports leading Midwest recruiting analyst, Alan Trieu. Alan's had some recent tweets that have definitely fired Mizzou fans up. That we definitely want to talk to him about. But first and foremost, Alan, thank you so much. Welcome to the Unwritten Rule. We're glad to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You caught me in a good time of year. There's not quite football yet, and recruiting's kind of dead, so this is not a bad time for me to hop on.
Perfect. August. Yeah, it still seems like I feel like we're getting news down the pipeline every single day, even though it is like the slower-ish period. But yeah, that's good to know. And kind of on that, just to give yourself a little bit of an introduction. I was reading and watching a little bit about you, but what kind of got you into recruiting just to start, and how has it been kind of growing your network to be kind of this big time expert on recruits and everything that goes on with Midwest football recruiting?
Yeah, I started an NFL draft website when I was in 8th grade, and that ended up kind of leading into other opportunities, including recruiting. I played in high school, wasn't good enough to get recruited, but was helping my friends get recruited, making their tapes, getting it sent around, trying to get them on what was the Insiders and Rivals at the time. And those have kind of been, Rivals is still around, but Insiders became Scout and then absorbed into 247. And so I got to know a lot of people that way, and started doing recruiting at about 18, 19. And like you said, kind of built up a network of contacts. It was hard at first, but through the years have gotten to know a lot of different people, done a lot of travel, done a lot of shaking hands. And it's gotten to the point that they never thought that recruiting would be as big as it is, though.
Are you kind of in the spot now in like your career that this is like where you're going to be for the rest of your your time working, or is there just a bigger picture, something else you want to pursue in the recruiting world?
To be honest, I've had opportunities to maybe go a little bit more national. I've had a number of, not to toot my own horn, had a number of schools say, "Hey, would you want to get in on this side?" And I don't. So, but kind of by my own choice. This is where I hope to be. I really like what I do. I don't want to have to cover the whole country. I like having my little bubble that I work out of. I feel like I do a better job having a smaller area than if I were to try to cover everybody. And so, yeah, I'm kind of used to what I do. So I'm not really trying to tip the boat, to be honest.
And now if you worked for one of these Big Ten schools, you have to be going to every which way with all this realignment stuff to recruit. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Kenny, you had a Wingo question. We got to eventually turn your attention to Mizzou, because that's what we know our fans want to delve into with some of the predictions you made.
I'm actually impressed that we made it like 4 minutes in. Wingo, so good job, guys.
Yeah, so we got to jump in a little bit about some of these Midwest guys that you're talking to and that you cover. What have you kind of heard that kickstarted some of this momentum for Mizzou to be picking up crystal balls for Wingo?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of different schools mentioned for him throughout the course of covering him. At one time, people were saying, "Hey, he's interested in Michigan." I think he still is. People were saying Tennessee. People were saying Texas. There's Steve Wiltfong, who's one of the best in the business, has a crystal ball in for Texas. There's been talk about Georgia. But whenever it's been mentioned to me of, hey, he likes this school, Mizzou always seems to be in there. Hey, he likes Texas and Mizzou. He likes Michigan and Mizzou. He likes Georgia, likes Tennessee, likes Mizzou. Mizzou's been a consistent factor there. And then recently I've been hearing more from my sources in that area that, hey, there's really a lot of buzz about him in Missouri, about him staying home, about the NIL opportunities that are afforded there. This wasn't directly said to me, but I do think that the success of someone like Luther Burden, who could have gone to some of the same schools, could have gone to Georgia, could have gone to a lot of the same programs, he decides to stay home, which was not something that a lot of people saw coming throughout the course of his recruitment. He was committed to other schools for a minute. And him staying home, him having success on the field, him having NIL and marketing opportunities, I think that could play a factor here. So even though that wasn't directly stated to me as it involves Ryan Wingo, I think that there's no question that can be used as a model of, hey, I could do in a way what Luther's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's something a lot of people have brought up, just maybe Wingo having the same opportunities at NIL or just being in the spotlight like Luther Burden. I mean, Eli Drinkwitz, and wide receiver coach Jacob Peeler, I mean, they've really, if they were to get Wingo, that would be 2 5-star receivers in 3 years, which doesn't happen at Mizzou ever, really. So, I mean Peeler, he also, I mean, he coached at Ole Miss. He coached DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Elijah Moore. I mean, what's kind of the key to his success? I mean, is he known as like this ace recruiter kind of in the recruiting world?
Yeah, I think having like now, I think it still comes back to being pretty simple when it comes to who's a successful recruiter. I think you have to have a resume, like you mentioned. You have to be able to have some of those names to say, I've worked with a couple of these guys. I don't think that alone gets it done. These kids get hit a lot from all sides. I think you have to be able to differentiate yourself somehow. And I think a lot of that just comes down to personality and how you interact with the kids. And I think he's really been able to do that when kids come to campus, even when we hear from younger guys, 25s and 26s that come through. The amount that not just him specifically, but the entire staff is able to connect with these kids. And I think Coach Drink deserves credit. I think he's involved more than the average head coach is. And so I think all of that put together is, you have to kind of have the three-pronged approach of, you have to have the resume, you have to have something to sell, you have to be able to connect with the kids and have that kind of personable nature. And then you have to have the sort of the motor, because it is a lot to coach and then recruit. And, you're driving around to schools during the evaluation periods, you're having to constantly message and DM these guys and make sure that they know where they stand with you. And then you got to try to get them to campus. You have to build relationships with their parents and their coaches and their circles. It is not, I mean, it can be a 24-hour job, hence the name of our website. So I think, I think he combines all three of those elements of that you need to be a really strong recruiter.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like you mentioned that with Drinkwitz, because even I just saw a video of Jeremiah McClellan saying like, oh yeah, he calls me every day, and that's something that he sold to Missouri fans when he came in. Was that he will kind of close the borders around the state, get all of those in-state guys. So it seems like, he's at least trying to deliver on that promise as best he can. Just on Wingo too, I'm curious if like, and this may be a dumb question, but his commitment date obviously isn't until December, later on. Does that sort of change like what you guys do and how you approach, putting in predictions with it being kind of a longer period than maybe some of these other guys for when you're going to hear where he decides to go?
Yeah, sometimes it is a little bit scary to step out there this early, especially when he's saying he could visit a different school for a college game every single weekend, and he probably will. And with somebody like that, these other schools now know, hey, Missouri's making this big play for him. And other schools are going to put together pretty attractive packages for him, I'm sure, when it comes to NIL and playing time and those things. And so we always put in those predictions knowing that they can change. I think one critique of crystal ball picks, and now that the whole industry does some sort of prediction method, whether it's a future cast or a prediction machine. One thing that gets criticized, and I think rightly so sometimes, is that predictions are often made after everybody kind of knows. And so what's the fun in that? So we try to balance hey, I'm going to have to probably babysit this Wingo prediction for the next few months. But as of right now, if you made me predict something, this is what I think he would do. And so we want that to reflect, and we want the fans to understand that, like, yeah, things are going to change. We're going to change the picks. We may not always be right, but that's the fun of predictions. So I think the predictions have become too much of a, hey, we know this is happening. And I think I would choose to look at it more as like how we view mock drafts. Like, it's fun to look at. Some of these things may happen, but we can't expect this to 100% turn out that way. And I think there's been so much pressure on us to be right that people don't put in picks till they know. And I think this is where it's fun getting to discuss with you guys why I'm making this prediction 3 months ahead of time.
Yeah.
Kind of circling back, just some of those things that might reel in a player. For Eli Drinkwitz, we've seen a lot of comments about how he's telling these kids that you can play now, especially wide receivers. I mean, that was a big part of the Luther Burden campaign, is that, you'll be one of the number one options for an offense that includes so many players. Have you kind of heard from a lot of these Midwest prospects and players that if I go to Mizzou, I could contribute right away, and that's something that could draw them away from a bigger SEC Big Ten school?
Yeah, I mean, I think every school tries to say that to an extent, right? And some say it in other ways. It's like, hey, there's always open competition. There's always a chance. It's up to you what you do when you come in. I think at Mizzou, it is different because they can point to Luther Burden. They didn't just make that promise and then he sat on the bench. They didn't just make that promise and then he got thrown just a couple balls here and there. Like he was an integral part of what they did. And so I think that they can really put their money where their mouth is when it comes to playing time. And I think that goes for a lot of the guys who have come through there. I know he ended up um, transferring out, but like Dominic Lovett is another example of a guy who was able to come in and make an impact who's from the state. I think they're able to sell too, that guys have tried to leave the state who are from the state and wind up coming back. You get Mookie Cooper back, you get Joe Moore back, you get guys who transfer back in. And I think that's another layer of recruiting now with the portal of why you recruit these in-state kids so hard, because if they go somewhere else, you don't get them the first time. Your chances are higher on the bounce back if you've recruited them the right way throughout. And so I think that's another layer of this. But I think that, yeah, I have heard from a lot of them that Mizzou is a place of opportunity. And that's not just something that they say. They're able to take a look at the guys who have contributed and know that that's not just kind of recruit speak.
Yeah, that's a good point on the guys coming back, transferring back in, even if they start their careers somewhere outside of Missouri. All right, on just some of your thoughts of whatever or can offer on two other in-state guys. We've been talking about them a lot on this show with Jeremiah McClellan, another receiver, and then Williams Nwaneri. They're obviously both set to commit here pretty soon, a lot sooner than Wingo down the line. But do you have any knowledge or know anything further on where Missouri stands with those two?
Yeah, I think Missouri's done a good job, really like a really good job of recruiting both of those guys to where Missouri has been a real factor in those recruitments. They're one of the final schools that they're picking from. I think at various points in time, those guys may have even been leaning in that direction or close to picking Mizzou. I don't think at this point I see either guy picking Mizzou though. So this is going to be one of those situations where you keep recruiting them, you keep the relationship, you don't burn the bridge because they didn't pick your school this time, and you never know what happens later in this recruiting process. You certainly don't know what's going to happen once they go off to school somewhere else, if that is the case. So I feel more confident that McClellan isn't going to pick Mizzou. I feel pretty good about my Ohio State prediction there. With Williams, I think there's still some uncertainty, although that's starting to lean more Oklahoma is what the buzz is, and that's makes sense. They've been a school that's been very consistently named as one of his favorites throughout this whole process. But especially with McClellan, where with skill guys, you run into some crowded rooms. Ohio State's going to have that. You saw Mookie Cooper make that jump. Jamison Williams is a guy that went to Ohio State initially and then went to Alabama and then transferred to Alabama and becomes a first-round pick. So you never know what's going to happen. But at this point in time, I don't see either of those guys announcing for Mizzou in the next couple of days here.
And on the topic of Williams, I mean, Oklahoma crystal balls of predictions, the interest there has been brewing for a while. And of course, OU's moving to the SEC. With conference realignment, a lot of these guys already know that if they commit to UCLA, they're going to be playing in the Big Ten whenever their college years comes around. Have you started to notice any trends with some of these guys about conference realignment having to play across the country every weekend?
Yeah, and I do think, living in Big Ten country and living in Michigan, I see it right away where the number one player in the state of Michigan last year, Dante Moore, committed to UCLA. And I don't think that was the full reason that he picked UCLA, but it was a factor knowing that this might happen. UCLA just came into Michigan and flipped a Northwestern commit, Jameer Benjamin. And I don't know that he picks UCLA without knowing that his parents are going to get to see him play in the Big Ten footprint several times. So it's definitely changing the face of how kids think about location and where the school is based. It's more about who that school is going to play now than it is where the school actually is. So I do notice that. Want to go back real quickly too, to what we just talked about with Nwaneri and with McClellan. I think sometimes we assess recruiting too much in commitments. Like, bottom line, did they get the guy or did they not get the guy? And I think with Mizzou, it also needs to be looked at from the standpoint of, I don't know that 5, 6, 7 years ago, Mizzou was in battles for 4 and 5-star in-state guys with Ohio State and with Oklahoma and with Georgia, and they're right there. They're making these schools work, and they're positioning themselves to get these guys on the bounce back. So I think when you assess how Mizzou's doing in recruiting, it's not just necessarily about getting these guys. You have to also look at it of, like, they are really gaining ground. They are making schools really have to work to pull guys out of the state of Missouri. And I think that's only going to gain more traction if they continue to have success, like, on the field. These guys come to Mizzou and play, and they're able to keep building upon what they're doing. So I would caution Mizzou fans too to not just look at, do we get this guy or do we not get this guy? They're in real battles with big time power programs for these recruits.
That's another thing that just came to mind about just the recruiting in general. For Eli Drinkwitz, it's been very 500 season, 6-6, 6-7, just going slightly under with the bowl games. I mean, there's a lot of fans that get frustrated with that he's not winning games. But you just said he's making a big push in recruiting. I mean, should fans just kind of settle back and just kind of let him work and really just find a year where he's going to splash and land these big time players?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you have to give a coach a chance to, like, completely turn the roster. I mean, he's, as of last year, the year before, he's still out there playing with a number of guys that he didn't recruit. So now you're really giving him an opportunity to not just recruit the players he wants, but actually give them a couple of years of development. And I think that with all schools, this isn't just with Mizzou, this is across the country. It's hard to have patience now. I think everybody wants immediacy, and recruiting coverage kind of pours gasoline on that by making people think, if we get Ryan Wingo, he's just going to show up next year and be this 5-star and we should win 10 games, where in reality, that's not necessarily how football works. So I do think that there needs to be some patience, and that's why I'm saying to kind of look not just at the final results either, but look at where things are trending with the program. And I think being right there in battles, like making Ohio State, who has incredible success at the wide receiver position, have to work to get a wide receiver recruit away from you. I think that that's a good sign about where recruiting's heading.
And you mentioned, I mean, Mizzou 5, 6 years ago was not ever in these types of battles for these caliber of players. What do you think has really been the big driving force behind them getting more into these level of recruits? I mean, is it NIL leveling the playing field a bit? Is it just the staff is that much better? Is it a combo of the two? I mean, what has really been the big driving force behind that?
I think it starts with effort. I really do. And it sounds weird to say, but some coaches can outwork other coaches on the recruiting trail. And I think Drink really puts a lot of time and effort into building relationships and being seen, and doing some things. Like, I remember him, there was the semi trucks, right, when he pulled up to see Caden Green and Armin Membo. Like, little things like that, I think, make a difference. And then building the relationships with the kids and getting the kids on campus over and over again. I think that matters. The amount that they are able to get these in-state guys, and with specified events, like they've done the night at the zoo thing. It's not just like, hey, show up on a Tuesday and we're going to walk you around a little bit. They've made it an event to come to Mizzou, and so I think that by itself matters a lot. Now, NIL certainly has a factor here, but they were starting to make this progress, I think, before NIL was fully implemented and before they fully had the system in. So there's no doubt that NIL is helping them now, but I think that this progress was being made even prior to NIL being something that they could fully offer.
Yeah, I like that take a lot too, especially what you said about for Mizzou fans to keep watching, what some of these guys who maybe commit elsewhere are doing, and like if there's a chance they could kind of flip back, and like the examples you turn to. I think that's something like, yeah, and the immediacy of college football fandom gets very much ignored, of like, you can still land these guys in the transfer portal. They have to, stay in school for a couple years before they go to the NFL. So I like that take a lot. Kenny Payton, you guys have anything else on Mizzou before I've got a completely off topic off-topic question next for Alan, but yeah,
No, I got one
yeah,
quick
go
one
ahead.
just with college football recruiting. I don't know if you've seen the new documentary yet, Alan, about Johnny Manziel, but I know that he wasn't a big time, recruit coming out. He wanted to go to Texas A&M. After, you were working in that time, how much did he change, recruiting for college football as well?
Yeah, I do remember him. I actually have not seen the doc yet. It's definitely on my list of ones to watch, like very, very soon here. I think that he was part of a shift in the way schools recruited quarterbacks for sure. Um, there were a lot of guys who didn't really fit the mold that I think he ushered in that new era of now everybody wants these RPO mobile quarterbacks. He was definitely a guy who changed that thought from like, we all want Tom Brady. We want a pocket guy. We want a guy who can stand there. And even the way we evaluate it, you go to the Elite 11 and watch guys just throw balls on air. And the Elite 11 has changed now to where they make guys throw the ball on the move a lot more. And I think Johnny and then guys who came after him, he sort of led to the Pat Mahomeses and the Kyler Murrays and guys like that now to where you see a lot of like 6-foot-ish type quarterbacks go high in the draft or get recruited by colleges. And so he started to change the way we evaluate quarterbacks and still talk about every day when we over evaluate things like size and arm strength and quarterbacks and what really matters in playing the position. And he's kind of an enigma because he was so successful in college and was so not successful in the NFL that you sort of, it's like, what exactly do we take from Johnny's situation as far as like learning what to value moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a good doc. I would recommend it. There's like things you learned that you had no idea even about Johnny football for even the person we all knew that he was in college. It's a wild ride.
And 247's in the documentary as well. They show a clip of a 247 reporter interviewing him. So that's what made me ask.
Oh, really? No, yeah. He was down in Texas, so I take no responsibility for that one, but I'll check it out for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to ask about this because I was just on your website, just kind of looking you up and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about your background in comedy? Because it said what I read was that you opened for Hannibal Buress, and like I just think it's so cool that you kind of had this double like I work for 247, but also just do stand up on as well. Are you still doing that? And what was it like opening for him? I got to know.
Yeah, man. I do still do it. I started in college. We had a student contest. I went to Grand Valley State. That was Brian Kelly, and they've got a pretty good football program at the D2 level. But did the student stand-up contest. Never done it before. Won it, and then ended up just kind of doing it on the side. I have an agent. They know that I do this full time. They know about 24/7, so they don't expect too much out of me. But it's been fun. I love my day job, but talking to 15, 16, 17-year-olds and their parents all day and trying to explain like, why am I a no star? Why am I a 2-star? Why am I a 3-star? Like I need a break sometimes, and the comedy gives me a nice outlet. And it also fits in well with the job. Like, hey, I need to go scout some kid in Wisconsin. Is there a comedy club there? And then we can figure it out. And so that I've been able to double up a lot of the time. Hannibal, I first opened for him in Chicago, and he wasn't Hannibal yet. He was up and coming. People were saying like, this is our kind of next guy that's coming up. He might have some opportunities, but do you want to come? And he was incredible. I mean, I think actually he was the opener at the time too. Like I was the first opener, he was the second opener, and then there was a headliner, but everybody was saying like, this guy's going to end up, being something. And so then I came back and opened for him when he headlined. And I think it was that night that he told everyone at the club, like, hey, I'm moving to New York. I just got a job as a writer on SNL. And then he came back to Grand Rapids, which is where I live, one more time to headline our festival. And they said, because you know him, you've worked with him a couple of times, will you open that show? So I opened for him. And then I want to say within like a matter of months, I went to see, I think the movie's like Neighbors that Zac Efron is in and Seth Rogen. And he was in that movie. And then he was in a bunch of stuff, and I've never heard from him or seen him ever again. So that is my story about Hannibal. But super nice guy, super funny guy, and it was nuts to open for him and have everybody say like he's going to be famous, and then watch that actually happen. Like he's within like a year of him being in Grand Rapids and sitting in a bar with me, he's like on the roast of Justin Bieber.
Right.
So, yeah. Pretty cool.
Is he kind of like that just in real life? Like he has a style that I think everyone like, is that just kind of how he is?
How he comes across in interviews and in his act, and like that's exactly how he is all the time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
The three of us are really big into comedy and just watching comedy specials, but where do you kind of like lean when you're making these jokes? Like, where do you kind of get your ideas from and your stories behind everything?
It's always real life. I have a note file on my phone that's constantly like throughout the day. Oh man, somebody said something, or something happened at the grocery store, or something happened in traffic. Like type that in on the phone and see what happens later. It's so hard to write jokes now with the internet and the way everybody's got Instagram reels. It's so hard to write something that's original. So I don't try to say like I have to write jokes about this or that. Just anything that's funny. I'm like, thank goodness I thought of that. Put it in there. So I'm not very picky anymore. Yeah, I'm not very picky anymore. If it's funny and I came up with it, it's going in there.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I just wanted to jump in because I know you were talking about your material kind of comes from things that have happened to you in real life. I mean, can you maybe tell the story then about how a recruit's dad, who was a doctor, offered to deliver your baby if you gave him a better rating on 247 on 24/7?
Yeah, there's not much more to the story than that. It's like, hey, we're really trying to get him ready. Even like 2 stars, man, like 2 stars. We want him to get to an Ivy League institution.
Oh, sure.
I see that they're, a lot of their commits are 2 stars. I see that your wife's pregnant. I'm a doctor. Like I would gladly like deliver your baby. And that person didn't even live in the state that I live in. I'm like,
Wow.
I'm not trying to cross state lines with a pregnant woman here to have you deliver a baby for free. So it was nothing ever really came of that. I don't actually know if that kid ended up playing college football. I know he had some.
Oh, wow.
But I kind of haven't paid attention since then. He's probably a doctor by himself, himself.
Sure. Yeah, if you went to an Ivy League school.
That is
You said it
100%
was a
story as is.
That's
told me
hilarious.
that he would deliver the child.
You said it was a 2-star guy. I was hoping it was going to be someone like big, like, it was Dorial Green Beckham or something.
I wish there was a better name attached to that because I have the email still, but no, that one's going to just stay. That one's just going to go down as a story I tell from time to time, but nobody big that I'm aware of.
That's awesome.
How long ago was that?
See, my son's turning 10 this year, so it's been a little bit.
Awesome. Okay, complete 180 here for this next question. You're in the pickleball world. You're an announcer. You've played yourself. How did you get into that?
I played high school tennis, and then it was actually probably around the same time because I was trying to teach my wife tennis, and she was pregnant, and she was like, I don't think I can run around this giant court. And then we kind of looked over and saw this tiny court, and we're like, what is that? And so we looked it up and bought some paddles that day and started playing around. I had a wooden paddle that I bought from the local sporting goods store. And I was like, I'm never going to buy one of those expensive paddles. I'm playing with this wooden paddle for the rest of my life. And then I got more into it and pretty soon was dropping $150 on a graphite paddle or a carbon fiber paddle. So then I just got really into it. I think it was just at that point, I needed something competitive. I was scared about my ankles playing lunchtime basketball. And,
sure.
Didn't want to play tennis anymore, and so got into pickleball, got really into it. And Grand Rapids, Michigan happens to be one of the hubs like in the country of pickleball. And so I happened to live in an area where it was giant and we had this big pro tournament every year. And so got involved that way.
That's cool. That's cool. I did the same thing. My grandparents got me into it. And like, I also was just like, I'll just use these wooden paddles. And I ended up buying myself one. It's an addicting sport to like get into.
I've tried everything, done them all. It's the most addicting sport I've ever played. I think part of it is because you can do it over and over and over again. Like when I played tennis or when I played basketball, like you had to give your body breaks. And you don't really have to in pickle. You can play like 8 hours of pickleball a day and do the same thing the next day. So I think that's part of the addiction too. But it is something about it. It's and I think Missouri's got a bunch. Whenever I go to Kansas City, I go to Chicken and Pickle. So I'm always looking for places to play.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever played with anyone. I think every time I've played, I've probably been the youngest by about 50 years. I have never yet to play with somebody my own age, which I would like to do, but it is very, very fun. And commentating on it,
average age of the pickleball player is lowering some. When I started,
yeah,
I mean, I was getting waxed by old ladies.
yeah, me too.
So it was a humbling experience. But I think there's a lot of younger people starting to play.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun sport. Okay, the only other thing I wanted to ask on your recruiting, you were talking about how like you kind of value more like the not putting predictions in just because they're obvious, like diving in, being able to talk with us and speculate and have that kind of fun with it. Do you guys at 247 get competitive with like how accurate you guys are on picks? Like, does it get competitive at all? Or it's like, oh, I got 90% in the 2021 class, you only got 83, whatever.
Yeah, I think we used to when the crystal balls first started.
Mm-hmm.
We were very competitive with that. Now we just kind of assume that like we want everyone on the network to be right. Like I celebrate my coworkers' victories. Like if Huffman got a prediction right on the West Coast, I'm happy. If Wiltfong got a prediction right, I'm happy. We got that one. Where we get competitive with each other is on ratings. When we have a big group chat that on draft day, it's kind of like, hey, why'd you only have this guy a 2-star? Like, what were you looking at there? Or like, oh man, I was the only one that had that guy ranked that highly. And so we get that. I think that's where we get more competitive is on who hit more of their draft prospects in their region.
Yeah, that's the worst words to hear is when Mel Kiper's like, this guy was only a 1-star recruit out of high school. How could that have happened?
Right. Or especially when it comes from like, they'll give me a hard time when some guy from Wisconsin Whitewater gets drafted. And I'm like, nobody offered. Wisconsin didn't offer him either in their backyard, so it's not my fault. But,
that's fine. I'm from Wisconsin. That's very real. They're
so now it makes me paranoid, and so I start evaluating Whitewater's class to make sure we don't get somebody. Yeah.
They're a powerhouse. They win a lot of games. Or it's like Kirk Cousins. I remember you said I watched the thing you said you missed on Kirk Cousins, and that was a big one.
Yeah, I was young and didn't know what I was doing. I would like to think I wouldn't miss Kirk today, but who knows? He wasn't a big time.
Right.
He was very, very under recruited, and from the same hometown as me, and at a high school that I don't think has had definitely not a Power 5 guy since, maybe not even a Division I guy since.
Yeah. Have you watched Quarterback, the documentary?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah. He won that. I loved Kirk Cousins after watching that.
He's a great dude. He still comes back here all the time, does a 7-on-7 tournament, plays in a flag football thing, like very active. I want to say his family, he's still got family in town here. So I think he banks at my mom's bank. So she says she sees him from time to time. So he's still around. He doesn't forget where he came from.
Wearing his Kohl's brand shirts and
yeah. Yep. So he's super recognizable around here.
That's awesome. Well, Alan, Kenny, Peyton, I don't know if you guys have anything more, but this was awesome. Yeah, Kenny, you got something?
I got one more. Going back to the pickleball for 1 second. On the announcing side, can you give us like your best pickleball? Like it's like the call of your life that you have to do right here.
Oh man, that's a good question. Like one that I've actually said.
Yeah, like just some catchphrase that you said, and you're like, oh yeah, that's.
Oh yeah,
the one.
yeah. Do you have any like go-tos? Like Mike Breen does the bang. Do you have like something for pickleball?
Have you guys seen the Selkirk paddles where they have this big like gap in the bottom of the paddle?
I don't think so.
No.
There's a brand called Selkirk, and so I'm going to give a quick boring story about pickleball paddles and their legality.
The history.
It's based on surface area, not just like the size of the paddle. It's surface area. So this company figured out that if we put a big hole at the bottom of the paddle, we can make the actual paddle longer.
Oh.
Because that doesn't count in the surface area. And then they're charging like $300 and some for this paddle. And so whenever two Selkirk players play against each other and one kind of hits a winner past the other one, I like to say like the hole in his paddle is better than the hole in that guy's paddle. So that's how it's holes in the paddle. We dance around some appropriateness levels there with talking about whose hole is better.
And holes and paddles.
So that's kind of my go-to pickleball.
Yeah. Yeah, you could probably sneak some more in there in pickleball. That's hilarious.
There's a lot of innuendo with
pickleball.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like it's like when the football announcers talk when they draw on the screen. You don't want to be, you don't want to accidentally drawing the wrong thing. Then you're all over Twitter.
Yes, same thing. It's the exact same thing with pickleball. We're talking about balls and holes in paddles.
Get
strokes,
tricky.
all kinds
Things
of
to remember. Things to remember.
Yeah. I have to not blend my comedy world and my pickleball.
Yeah, exactly.
They want some of that, but not too much of it.
Right, drop a couple things. Oh,
Maybe
that's
if
hilarious.
I hope pickleball gets bigger, and then they'll start showing it on like Showtime or HBO or some place where we have no filters. And
there you go. Yeah, make it like MMA. You can just say whatever you want.
Would be great. Yeah, me and Joe Rogan will announce the next pickleball tournament.
Oh my God, Joe Rogan on pickleball. It's just this. He does it the same way he does MMA. He just gets like loud.
The way that pickleball is going, it could happen.
There you go.
It's like the big celebrity game in Hollywood now. Like Jamie Foxx has a paddle company. There's pickleball is going to get huge. So if in 5 years I'm no longer in recruiting and doing pickleball, you guys will remember that I said that.
Yeah, we're gonna have you back on when you're the world's biggest pickleball commentator on
I hope so.
You'll be our awesome. Joe Buck of pickleball.
Yeah,
we'll
recurring
keep
guest.
Bringing you back.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right, Alan, this was awesome. Thank you so much for filling us all in on. I know you definitely answered a lot of Missouri fan questions on where they stand with a lot of these big recruits, and you were a joy to have on. We would love to have you back, especially as recruiting heats up. If pickleball heats up, we're gonna start looking at it more now, guys, on the show. Make some bets on it. I don't know.
Do it. It's going to be pickleball is going to be in the sports book. I'm pretty sure now. That was the thing that got passed. So you will be able to. I can help handicap and tell you where.
Yeah, make pickle bets. Alan can be our insider. We're gonna go 3 for 3 on best beats of the week every time now.
Those are the crystal ball picks I want to be right on when there's money.
Pickleball bets.
Pickleball bets.
That's awesome.
So we'll do it. But yeah, Missouri's doing a great job in my region, so I have no doubt we'll have plenty more to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to have you back on, and yeah, thanks so much. And we'll keep an eye on your Twitter for any more big future casts and whatnot. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Alan.